Welcome. This is Gary Salton, Chief of R&D and creator of IOP Technology. This movie reports on research that answers the question of whether men and women who reach executive rank do their jobs differently. Now, estrogen and testosterone create obvious differences between men and women. But the issue is whether these differences affect business decisions. If there is a difference, it would mean that the genders are using different information processing strategies. In other words, if you believe that men and women would make different decisions on a particular issue, you believe that they use different information processing strategies. They would have to. Think about it. If they did everything exactly the same, took in the same information, processed it the same way, and wanted the same outcome, they'd arrive at the same decision. The only way you can get a change is to change the input, process, or output. In scientific terms, this is called an axiomatic truth. Fortunately, information processing is exactly what the IOP profile measures. Plus, it's exhaustive. It takes into account all of the information processing strategies used in the conduct of life. If there are no gender differences in decision making, we should find that, on average, both genders will use the same IOP profile. Well, if you're going to test something like this, you better have a pretty big sample. IOP does. The IOP Executive Database has a total of 1,729 executives who can be identified by gender. These are real executives conducting their daily business across the globe, but mostly in the United States. There's something else to consider before we jump into the analysis. We already know that there are systematic differences in IOP profiles by organizational level. That means we already know that a vice president's IOP profile is different from that of a manager, and that the profile of a manager is a lot different from that of a professional. So, to make sure that we don't mix up changes due to organizational level with those due to gender, we separated the groups. 17%, or 300 people, in our sample were VPs. 83%, or 1,429 people, were managers or directors. Both of these numbers are big enough to give a large degree of statistical validity to this study. The next thing to do was to divide our separated groups into male and female components. At the VP level, this gives us 56 females and 244 males. For the mid-management level, we have 951 males and 478 females. Even after dividing them up, the categories are still big enough to be creditable. We are now ready to start testing. But before we do, let's take a look at the graphics we will use. This is the IOP profile. We could use it for our gender test. However, let's convert it to something everyone is more familiar with. Now, each axis of the IOP profile is an information processing strategy. The distance from the origin, the points where the lines cross, is a measure of the strength of that strategy. We can take each one of these measurements and post it to a standard bar chart, one bar for each axis in the IOP profile. We'll use the bar charts to contrast men and women along the various information processing dimensions. Well, we now are in a position to do a little testing. Let's start with the VP level. Men are represented by bars, women by the line. You don't need statistics to tell you that the IOP profiles are virtually identical. But just to be safe, a Mann-Whitney statistical test confirmed that there is no statistically significant difference between male and female VPs. In fact, the thought-based strategies are exactly identical. For the IOP analytical HA and idea-oriented RI strategies, there's nothing to talk about. But there are some small differences in the action-based strategies, IOP's reactive stimulator and logical processor. We can take a deeper look into these. First, the instant action RS strategy. Here we see fewer women at the lower end of the scale, the left side of the chart, and more at the higher end, the right side. Not statistically significant, but interesting. The women who made VP level tend to be a bit more assertive and decisive than their male counterparts. So, if women are using more of a spontaneous RS style, they're probably using a bit less in the disciplined LP style, right? Right. The LP reverses the RS direction. There are more women VPs with low commitment and fewer with high. Again, not statistically significant, but interesting. So, how about a little speculation? The women who are VPs now started their careers in the 1970s and 80s. They are the ones who busted through the glass ceiling. You don't do that by being timid. The decisive, assertive, and spontaneous RS strategy is well suited to that task. The residual of that initial posture is probably still reverberating in the numbers. At least to this researcher, this speculation seems to have a ring of truth. Putting our speculations aside, we can say with high certainty that at the VP level, men and women are identical in their information processing approach. Both genders demand similar levels of detail, share a common risk profile, offer about the same number of ideas, assess options in similar ways, and so on. It is reasonable to expect that the decisions made will not vary by gender. For all intents and purposes, the genders, at least at the VP level, are equally adept in their decision making. But what about mid-management? For this element of the analysis, we lump managers and directors together. They're both mid-management. Here's the result. At mid-management level, the strength of men and women along each IOP dimension are literally identical. The differences are so small as to be rounding issues. Even if we look deeper into each dimension, the differences are virtually non-existent. As you can see in this series of graphs, the distribution of males and females, their strength in each category, is the same. There's nothing even worth mentioning by way of distinction. But, just as a pro forma exercise, Mann-Whitney U-tests were run. They confirm the obvious. There is no statistically significant difference. Exactly as we saw at the VP level, there is no difference in the way mid-level men and women process information. If they accept the same goal, are placed in the same situation, share the same competency, the average man and woman will come up with decisions of the same character and quality. What does this mean? It means that the corner has been turned. In terms of the way they process information, men and women are now on equal ground. Nothing special is demanded of either gender in terms of their information processing strategy. Does this mean that gender does not matter at all? Of course not. The IOP information processing model talks about how decisions are made. It does not address what they are made about. There are real gender differences. Physiology, biology, chemistry, and cultural factors are just a few things that make sure that there are differences. These differences are likely to cause different sensitivities. In other words, while the process is the same, the what to which that process is applied can vary. Men and women can pay attention to different things, but if you standardize that input, these differences will evaporate. Is this good or bad? Well, over half of the world's population are women. Doesn't seem like a bad idea to have executives on board who are sensitive to the things that interest them. In any event, the quality of decisions will not suffer, regardless of the gender of the average decision maker. Both genders process information in exactly the same way. You can read the study on which this movie is based on my research blog. Here's the address. The blog is entirely based on research, no opinions, just findings based on hard data. The easiest way to get to the blog and to the research of interest to you is through the IOP.com homepage. Scroll through the list of research studies and click the ones of interest. Thank you for viewing this video. If you want more information on IOP, you can go to our websites at iop.com or oeinstitute.org. Both sites have much more information on how IOP can be used to improve the functioning of both individuals and groups. Thank you again for your interest in IOP technology.